You very much indeed, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Souad Ali. I am the founding chair of the ACU Council for Arabic and Islamic Studies that is running this, lecture series. I'm also associate professor of Middle Eastern Studies with a focus on Arabic Studies and Islamic Studies in the School of International Letters and Cultures in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences at ACU. I'm also head of Classics and Middle Eastern Studies and director of the Arabic Studies program. I would like to introduce the Council of Arabic and Islamic Studies so that you have a background about the council that runs the series. So the ASU Council for Arabic and Islamic Studies was established at Arizona State University to acknowledge the significant contributions of Arabic studies and Islamic civilization and cultures to the world at large, both historically and in the modern age. The Council's research and teaching programs seek to promote multiculturalism, diversity, interfaith dialogue, cross-cultural understanding, and the expansion of human civilization and cultures through Arabic, as well as other Middle Eastern languages, including Persian and Turkish. Our school also runs other Middle Eastern languages such as Hebrew, and we used to have some other Islamic, countries' languages such as Urdu, and as much as we have faculty to teach them. The Council seeks to develop constructive academic and cultural interaction and partnerships between ASU and similar groups in the Arab and Muslim worlds. And of course, one of the major languages we teach, is Indonesian as well, which is what Professor Suwarno teaches. And at this point, allow me please to introduce Professor Suwarno and then inviting him to begin. He requested me not to give him a full introduction, and so I'm going to abide by what he told me. Professor Peter Suwarno is an associate professor of Indonesian at the School of International Letters and Cultures at Arizona State University, College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. He is also affiliated with the Center for the Study of Religions and Conflict at Arizona State University. Of course, he is also associated with the ASU Council for Arabic and Islamic Studies. And his teaching includes Indonesian languages, Southeast Asian religions and conflicts, and eco-linguistics. He has tremendous research in several areas, and he didn't want me to go through that, but I will just confine myself before saying that he created and introduced build the Indonesian programs at ASU, and he is the director of the Indonesian. He also held several administrative jobs. He was the associate director of SILC, School of International Letters and Cultures. He was also the director of the and the chair of the undergraduate committee, steering committee, and the chair of he was a chair of that for a very long time. So his work has made significant contributions to the academic community, promoting peaceful religious communication and intercultural understanding through interdisciplinary research and international collaborations. At this point, I'm very happy to, invite him to give his talk today, and his talk today is titled "The Decline of Islamic Discourses in Indonesian Politics." And he's asking the question that he's going to address: has the government, the Indonesian government, succeeded in restraining hardline Islamic movements? Peter, my good friend and colleague, Professor Suwarno, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Souad Ali, for the kind introduction. Good evening, everyone. I saw some from Indonesia, so it would be good morning. Thank you very much for attending my presentation today, which is originally titled "The Decline of Islamic Discourse in the Indonesian Politics." But I'm going to make some changes. So I'm going to go ahead and share my slide.
Go ahead, please.
And I'll go to the first one here. So originally the title was The Decline of Islamic Discourses in Indonesian Politics. But I think if you look at the discourse throughout the history of Indonesia, it's not just the decline, but also the rise. So I'm going to go back to all history in Indonesia when discourses are declining and when they're arising. The rise and decline pretty much depend on political structure and political power dynamics. Why? Because political dynamics actually dictate what topics are considered capable or acceptable and who are authorized to speak, what venues are available, and the language use strategy that can empower certain group over the others. Okay, that's why we have a discourse, critical discourse analysis. But today, I'm not going to do critical discourse analysis, presenting a lot of excerpt from writing and speeches about Islamic discourse in Indonesia. So the purpose simply is to describe when and in what political dynamic, what political circumstances that allow Islamic discourse to rise and to decline. So in this case, I'm going to examine the political historical context more, and then focusing on the discourse itself. Of course, I will talk about a little bit about the discourse, the use of the devil term as well as the God terms in the discourses and its ramification to the development of Islamic discourse in Indonesia. But I will basically just focus on the historical political context. And then at the end, if I can and have the time, I want to describe also the current situation, the position of the contestation between the competing discourses in Indonesia, especially under Jokowi. So let's go 100 years back, starting from 2020s. Okay, before when Indonesia was still under Dutch colonial government. Okay, the expression of leaders, national leaders at that time was actually represented more in magazine, such as Hikmah, more Islamic, and Pikiran Rakyat, People's Thought, which is more nationalist. Okay, even then you can see the contestation. Of course, there are other discourses like communism, socialism, Javanese culture, and all that. You know, they're competing for attention, but the one that was really apparent, there was apparent conflict and contestation was between the Islamists and the nationalists. So the leader, the outspoken and wrote a lot about this was Sukarno, who will be later the first president of Indonesia, and then Muhammad Natsir representing Islam. And the view are clearly defined, underlined here, that nationalism for Sukarno, nationalism is the best way for uniting the Indonesian people because of the diversity of the Indonesian people. Whereas Muhammad Nasir, considering that the majority of Indonesians are Muslim, 87 of Indonesians were Muslim at the time, so he believed that Islamic teaching containing all a principle of morality and justice should be the foundation of Indonesian independence. Okay, now that kind of principle, you can see now the conflict already, the contestation, the most important contestation in Indonesian politics since early on, even before the independence, was between nationalism and Islamism. Okay, but it is also realized in the later meetings. The formal real meeting of Indonesian leaders at that time was under the Japanese colonial government, and they formed the preparatory committee for the Indonesian independence. They met in May and June 1945. They agreed to form 5 principles called Pancasila as the grounding or founding principle for Indonesian law and the constitution. Now, the contestation here is especially on the first principle. The first principle says believing in one God. Now, that's good. Everybody agrees with that. But at one point during Jakarta Charter, they also agreed that actually they add 7 words. That is the implementation of Sharia law for Muslims. So believing in one God with the implementation of Sharia law for Indonesian Muslims. Okay. But later on, the representative from Eastern Indonesia mostly Christian, actually are concerned about this addition of 7 words. They approach moderate Muslims, especially Muhammad Hatta and Haji Agus Salim, and they agreed actually, yeah, well, okay, rather than the Christian splitting, not wanting to join part of Indonesia, it's better to just have believing in one God and not having the Sharia law, implementation of Sharia law for Indonesian Muslim. See, even that was a fierce fight. And that discourse of 7 words, the implementation of Sharia law, added as the principle, has been under a lot of discussion and has been demanded by a lot of hardline Muslim Indonesia, even until today. They still mention that. Okay, so that's the early discursive contestation that actually permeates until today. Okay, so after the independence, Indonesia was busy actually still fighting against the Dutch. The Dutch ones stay still there, but after 1949, the Dutch actually, okay, basically let Indonesia have its independence. And from 1949 until 1955, Indonesian hold the first most democratic election, because Indonesia just coming out, they were all ideals about democracy and all that. So yeah, but during the campaign, Masyumi is the largest hardline Islamic party in Indonesia, the first and the largest. Okay, a lot of followings during the campaign with a large mass participation. They believe that they're going to win the election and they're going to have the implementation of Sharia law or even caliphate as part of their discourse. But then what happened was Masyumi only gained the second place. The first place was the Nationalist Party. The second place was the Islamic Party. And the third place was the Communist Party. And I want to remember that thing, this is the major political power in Indonesia: nationalist, secular nationalist, Islamist, and then communists. Okay. Now, after that, Masyumi was still fighting really hard to show their influence, and they have the fight for the implementation of Sharia law or Islamic teaching as the basis of Indonesian constitution and all that. In the end, the fight was endless, and Sukarno, as the first president of Indonesia, realized that liberal democracy actually is not compatible for Indonesian people, because it doesn't end anywhere. It doesn't achieve anything. So he issued a presidential decree. Basically, this is an iron fist kind of approach to end the debate between nationalists and Islamists, the first one in the debate. So because of the deadlock. So the decree actually later lead to the banning of Masyumi. So Masyumi was banned by Sukarno, and then the Masyumi and Islamic hardliners politicians went underground, some joining a rebellion. There is Islamic hardliner rebellious groups, So this is also the first repression by Sukarno. The first Indonesian repression against the Islamists is during the Sukarno regime, after he issued a decree banning Masyumi, and even jailing some of the leaders of Masyumi as well. Okay, now after Sukarno is very obsessed with the idea of the discourse of unity. So he's trying to unite based on the result of the election. Remember, nationalists, Islam, and communism were the winner, basically. So he wanted to try to unite the three. This principle is coming to his speech. His speech is called Nasakom, very famous one. Okay, and he tried to persuade the people to agree with it, but in the end, it doesn't work. These three are not compatible, are not reconcilable. Okay, so in the end, actually, it led to the. And then actually, Sukarno were very close to the Communist Party, more. And then that led to the coup, the tragic coup in 1965, which led General Suharto came to power with the assistance of CIA and USA. Okay. And then formally overthrown Sukarno using the military force, of course, in 1967. Now, the Islamists were also taking part, played a very important role in crushing the communists in Indonesia. So the Islamists was expecting that, well, since they take part, they play a very important role in supporting Suharto, so they might have an opportunity actually to express their demands for more Islamic demands, such as the implementation of Sharia laws or other teaching of Islam that would be implemented. Okay, so Suharto came up with a different kind of discourse. He didn't really like the demands of the Islamists. He rejected Islamic discourses. You know, the mission program values are all rejected. This is the first part of Suharto. So the discourse, the famous discourse during Suharto repressive approaches against Islam was extreme right and extreme left. Extreme kiri, extreme kanan was very popular discourse, and it just trying to portray, emphasize the enemy of Suharto. Who are the enemy? The communists. But the communists are gone, you know. What who exists is now the extreme right, which is the Islam, the hardline Muslims. Okay, the prosecution was very, very rampant, you know, banning the hijab wearing in schools, although there were not many people wearing hijab during the first period of Suharto's administration. But hijab or niqab was forbidden in school, and then the marginalization, detention, even prosecution of Islamic leaders. So at that time of the first period of Suharto, actually, the Islam was depoliticized, and giving opportunities only to very moderate and liberal Islam to thrive. So Islamic discourse was only in spiritual, intellectual, and cultural areas, okay? But this is good. It's not, well, some people, some scholars look at it as good because it is the era in Indonesia when the Islamic hardlines are suppressed and they went underground. What they can thrive is in moderate, tolerant, inclusive Islam, producing scholars, very famous scholars, and such as Nukolis Majid, with the motto of, this is another discourse, Islam yes, Islamic Party no. And this was popular. And it pleased Suharto, the president, liked it. Okay, so it thrives. It was good, and the effect of this discourse, Islam yes and Islamic Party, is actually has permeated until today. If you look at the result of the election later, it will show that again and again the hardline Islamic Party never win. The other winners are only the secular nationalist party that win, or even if even the moderate one are never the major winners in almost all Indonesian election. It just shows that the effect, the power of this Islam yes, Islamic Party no is very strong. You know. All right. Now after Suharto, no, let me know the second part now. The second part. This is okay. Well, Suharto didn't believe and didn't trust after so many years, didn't trust his general, the general was General Beni Murdani, who is Christian. There's some friction and disagreement, and he doubted his support and the military support. So he started getting close to the Islamists. Okay. Now, I want to define Islamist a little bit wider, broader here. Islamist is any politician or Islamic organization that are expressing their political desire involving Islamic teaching and Islamic values. Okay. So that's a little bit wider, not just the radical one, but the conservative one and involved in politics. Okay. So I would say that Suharto created, after the friction with the military, doubting his support, he started getting closer to the Islamists and start fulfilling their requests. Now, during the second, this is starting from 1990s, late 80s, like 89s, and then 90s, okay, with the establishment of ICMI, the Indonesian Muslim Intellectuals Group, okay? So he start allowing things that he forbidden in the before, like students wearing veils in school. They also established Islamic court. They also established Islamic family law, Islamic Sharia banking or Islamic banks. He even went to pilgrimage to Mecca to show his Islamic, identity. Okay, this is the era of Islamic term. Bill Liddell, a researcher on Islam in Indonesia. So Islam was repoliticized, becoming the leading and dominant, creating a leading dominant Islamic discourse in Indonesia. Not only that, after being suppressed for so many decades, the real Islam, even hardliners, are starting to express themselves, intensifying their da'wah. And one of the most important changes in the Indonesian society is the Islamization of Abangan. Abangan is a nominal Islam, nominal Muslims. That is Muslim in names only, but never really practice the five pillars of Islam. But with the Islamization, a lot of Indonesians who never go to mosque now go to mosque. Okay. And I was affected a little bit by this because when I was coming to my home village, I was a little bit surprised. My mother asked me, "Are you going to the mosque?" This is during the Friday prayer. And it is that if you don't go to the mosque, go inside, don't come out until people are gone from the mosque. Why is that? It is unsightly to see a male, okay, during the Friday prayer and not going to mosque. So I was just shocked with the rampant, massive effect of all the Islamization of Abangan. Okay, all right. So there's also freedom of Islamic expression. Okay, and you start seeing a lot of demands from Islam. But they also feel that the demands is not fulfilled. And ironically, the Islamists who Suharto supported and given the opportunity to thrive actually become one of the main causes of Suharto's fall in 1998. So with the fall of the Suharto, there is an election. And remember that. Islam was given the opportunity to thrive. Their discourse are massive and widespread. The Abangans are becoming more devout Muslim now. But look at the result of the election. The secular nationalists still won, 56%. The moderate Islamic parties only gained 31%. The hardline, in this case PKS, which is the Justice Party, which is the hardline Islamist party, only gained 2%. Again, the pattern again, as we show even from the beginning of Indonesia, despite the conservatism of devoutness or hardline speeches, or even groups that are advocating Sharia law and caliphate, very strong, massive. Still, in the end, Indonesian people still should vote for the nationalists. Okay, now let's go to this is the transitional era. We have three presidents during the transitional era or the reform era after the fall of a dictatorship of Suharto. We have Habibie, Gus Dur, and Megawati. This is a little bit chaotic situation because a lot of people they have different demands from different groups of people, from the military, from the Islamic, from the nationalists, and all that. So I think I would just want to like the highlight of the Gus Dur because he was the first and the only Muslim cleric elected as the Indonesian president, and he failed because he used egalitarian approaches, liberal democratic approaches, okay, and also trying to combine Islam and democracy. Remember these two approaches were used by Sukarno? Remember Sukarno during the liberal democracy after the election? There is a deadlock between the communists, the nationalists, and the Islamists. It cannot be combined. The same thing Gus Dur here didn't learn the lesson, actually. It's very difficult to really, although conceptually in the discussion, you can talk as much as possible about combining the discourse of combining Islam and democracy. But the challenge for that kind of discourse in Indonesia was so great because of the vocal demands, especially from the Islamists. Okay. All right. And then the second also mystic is actually, he is using the egalitarian or liberal democratic approach, giving a lot of people voices, and then it resulted in a chaos. There are lots of conflict, especially during that time, the Christian and Muslim conflict in Moluccas, which killed about 40,000 people. All right. Then we move. Finally, the parliament had agreed actually with the law. We have to have a direct presidential election. And we have a former general, Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono, becoming the Indonesian first directly elected president. Okay. But he realized that Islamic discourse was very strong in Indonesia. The demands are very clear. Okay. So there are also have lots of supports. And part of the supporters, his supporters, in winning the election were also from the Islamists. So he gave a lot of opportunity. He gave a lot of openness and freedom, and tolerated even the some of the most, I would say, hardline, intolerant Islamist groups, including Islamic Defender Front, FPI, Hizbut Tahrir Indonesia, HTI, and I would also say Indonesian Council of Ulama. A lot of people don't agree that this is a hardline, a conservative group, but I will explain why, okay? And then also others. There are lots of opportunities for even Salafis and Wahhabis during his term to thrive. More than that, GI, Abu Bakar Bashir, a leader of Jama'ah Islamiyah, a terrorist group, were also allowed to thrive, to establish their boarding school in Indonesia. As a result, there was terrorism, church burnings, also bombing, like in Bali, as well as in Marriott Hotel and Australian Embassy in Jakarta. All right. Now I want to go back to the three that were allowed to grow and thrive during the SBA. Because of his fear, his support actually come from the hardline Islamist. Hizbut Tahrir Indonesia must have gotten a lot of funding. It became the legal organization in Indonesia, free to develop its strategy preaching. It preached in different venues, mosques, offices, organizations, even university campuses and neighborhood. The massive following in just a few years, many people agree with Caliphate, and then they also become hardliners themselves. And to show its power and the large following, they had a mass meeting in Jakarta Stadium. It's filled, tens of thousands of people, members of Hizbut Tahrir, as well as its sympathizers. It shocked the nationalists, of course, because they see a lot of banners saying, we need Khilafah, we need Khilafah, okay? That's the first group that was thriving in Indonesia, penetrating even campus. So you see a lot of professors, even in some cases rectors, who are becoming more lenient or giving the opportunity to those organizations to thrive in campus, okay? The second one is the Thuggish one, okay? This is the FEI. So if you know, the Hizbut Tahrir demand is the establishment of a caliphate in Indonesia. But this one is not quite the caliphate, but it is the implementation or strict implementation of Sharia law. And it's notorious raids and attacks, entertainment spot, hotel, bars, prostitution, gambling, pornography, and all that are this enemy. But it's also very exclusive, and the term kafir is used a lot. And a lot of time, the victims are the minority, And the ones that are attacked by this group are usually Christians and Ahmadiyya. This is the result of the opportunity given by SBA, the freedom for hardline Islamists to grow in Indonesia. Okay. Now, the next one is a little bit controversial because, well, I have some friends in this Indonesian Council of Ulama. The reason that I include this as one of the conservative group is because of the fatwa. So it issued edicts, and a lot of time, the majority of the Indonesian people respect and follow the edicts. And the edicts, the majority, a lot of them, not all of them, a lot of them actually are a little bit exclusive and intolerant, including the fatwa of anti-secularism, anti-pluralism, and anti-liberalism. Anti-minority group like Ahmadiyya, okay? And also, there's a lot of discourse of purification, meaning the purity of Islam has to be guarded. So it leads to a lot of some fatwa that during Christmas time, there's a lot of controversy in Indonesia. The controversy is whether Muslim can say Merry Christmas to. Can you say Merry Christmas to Christian if you're Muslim in Indonesia? Every December, every Christmas period, Christmas holidays, there's always a controversy, lots of discussion in Indonesia whether Muslim can say Merry Christmas to Christian. And that started from an edict, a fatwa from this MUE, that Muslims are not allowed to participate in celebration of Christmas. And it is translated into not allowing to say Merry Christmas. Okay. All right. Also, the result of SB allowing the Islamic hardliners to thrive is there's a lot of Islamic codes, Sharia law in different municipality. At least 63 head of municipalities enacted Sharia local codes. Okay. I don't want to go to details of that. I just want to show that if you give the Islamists, the hardliners, the opportunity, they can thrive massively, okay, throughout the Indonesia. Okay. All right. Now, after SBA, there is an election 2014, 2024. That's the Jokowi 2 terms. And I want to term this, the Jokowi's regime as the Pancasila term. Remember Pancasila, the 5 principle? Remember the first principle that is debated that should include Sharia law, and many disagree. And it's still not including Sharia law, okay? During the SB's thriving of hardliners, Islamic movement and groups, Pancasila was practically sidelined, or sometimes even mocked, okay? Sometimes not only criticized, sometimes even insulted, okay? I can give you a short example of that Pancasila during that era, okay? Nobody would dare to criticize or let alone insult any Islamic teaching, but Pancasila's principles, you can, okay? But this is really interesting. The Jokowi's opponent was supported by Islamists. His opponent at that time was Prabowo Subianto, a former military leader, but a lot of his supporters are Islamists. So the fact that Jokowi won the election, again, it shows however conservative the Indonesian Muslims are, in the end, and when it comes to voting, they tend to vote more secular nationalist parties or leaders. That is what is interesting. That's why Jokowi brave himself just saying that I'm Indonesian, I am Pancasila. He want to show himself that he is actually for Pancasila and trying to revive Pancasila. This is a shift from a freedom of conservative Islamic discourse to more secular nationalist discourse, okay? He was thinking that, well, I'm elected, not the ones supported by the Islamists, okay? All right. The Pancasila turn. So he started actually, it's not without challenge, okay? Jokowi, the fact that Jokowi was elected when he was a governor, and his vice governor was a Chinese and a Christian. If you're Chinese and Christian in Indonesia, you're a double minority. Okay, the fact that Jokowi selected him as his vice governor when he was a governor gave him an identity. Not only is he tolerant, but also he is very close to minority groups. Okay, he is supporting minority groups. And the Muslim did not like it. The majority of Muslim in Jakarta, when there was an election, a governor election, and Ahok is the name of his vice governor, a Chinese and a Christian, a double minority. So Ahok was become as a candidate. One of the discourse widespread in Jakarta at that time was non-Muslim cannot be a governor, citing a Quranic verse that is Al-Ma'idah number 51 or something like that. Okay. So because of the rampant discourse of the powerful discourse of Al-Ma'idah 51, so Ahok made a statement that about the Quranic verse being devious and all that, leading to blasphemous accusation. You got to be very careful when you start criticizing Quranic verses. Okay. So he was in trouble. Okay. But Jokowi still support him. And this is when Jokowi faced the largest challenge from the hardline Islamists in Indonesia, when FPI, MUI, and HTI, all those conservative group that I mentioned, they formed, like they staged a demonstration. Tens of thousands of demonstrators came to criticize, actually to ask that Ahok be jailed for his blasphemous statement. And Jokowi was actually indirectly attacked because Ahok was his candidate. Okay, so that's Jokowi challenge. Okay, so he knew actually that the Islamic hardliners, despite his popularity and his sort of limited success in spreading the discourse of Pancasila, the more nationalist, secularist discourse. Okay, he knows there is a challenge. There's a lot of hardliners out there that would also attack him or challenge him. Okay, so he had we got it sign an amendment or regulation that was in 2013 actually. The regulation was 2013, but he amended it in 2017. That is, it is against the law to insult the principles of Pancasila. And the parliament agreed actually. Okay. And this is a long story why the parliaments actually agree and likes Jokowi, because Jokowi was very popular. His popularity started from his low profile, like ordinary people, representing the poor people, close to the ordinary people. He's not from the military. So he got a lot of support from ordinary people, from the majority of Indonesia. His approval ratings run about 80%. So for the parliament actually members actually not to support him would be like not good politically. Plus Jokowi also give a lot of concession, a lot of transaction between him and the parliament. And then later actually 80% of the parliament members actually supported Jokowi, or 80% of the parties supported Jokowi. Okay, so that's the issue there. That's why it's easier for Jokowi to pass the law, including this one. There's a law against insulting the principle of Pancasila. If you look at its discourse, insulting Pancasila is punishable. Okay, the same as insulting the Quran. You look at this here. So in the past, the man-made secular nationalist view of Pancasila can be criticized, can be mocked, sidelined whatsoever. And Quranic verses, you cannot do it. Now he's trying to make the playing level, make it level the playing field. Okay, make it more plain. Okay, so that it's equal. So Pancasila is now is similar in status in that you cannot insult Pancasila. Okay. If you can mute, probably it would be great. Can you mute, please? Thank you. Can you
Oh,
mute?
would you please mute yourself so that we can follow Professor Suwarno, and we will open it up for discussion later. If your
Can you mute it?
microphone is on, please mute it.
Mute it, please.
Prachi, could you please mute this person? Thank you.
Yeah, I already muted.
Go ahead, Professor Suwarno, keep going. Sorry about that.
Okay. Let me go back here. Where was I? Okay. So let me go to the challenge again. Okay. Then this is the big one showing the authoritarian color of Jokowi with the support of the parliament, who 80% of them supporting him, is banning the Hizbut Tahrir Indonesia. So this is what a lot of Western scholars, including Thomas Farr from Australia, consider this as an authoritarian turn. I would like to term it Pancasila term, but he considered it an authoritarian turn. There's a lot of policy that he issued that he decided that actually shows his color, his authoritarian color. Okay, but there's a challenge for him in the second term election because Prabowo Subianto, his opponent, was supported by Islamists. And he realized that Islamist discourse is still very powerful and influential in the Indonesian community. So that's why he chose his vice president, one of the most conservative clerics, that is the head of Indonesian Council of Ulama, which issues conservative and even exclusive fatwa, remember? So Ma'ruf Amin is his choice for that. This is just to show that, yeah, I am actually nationalist, secular, but also I'm close to the Islamists in a way, okay, trying to mitigate it that way. And then another one that is really big also is his decision to ban the Front Pembela Islam, Islamic Defender Front. Remember that other conservative movement or hardliner movement or even violent movement, Islamic movement. He banned that too. Now, Western scholars look at it as if this is really is authoritarian. You just ban, Hizbut Tahrir in Indonesia is not violent. They just, it's rampant. It's really affecting a lot of people, including in campus too. There's a lot of hardliners, professors, academicians, educators, which is endangering the country according to nationalists probably. But if you look at it, actually, the Indonesian people, according to the survey, support this. Not only the parliament, 80% of whom are supporting Jokowi, but the survey also shows that actually the Indonesian people agree with the banning of, not all, the majority agree with the banning of Hizbut Tahrir Indonesia and Islamic Defender Front. Okay, so that's the back and forth, the fight here, the challenge between nationalism and Islamism that started at the beginning, pre-independence, actually going on until today. So in addition to banning Hizbut Tahrir and FPI, the Islamic Defender Front, he also consolidated the implementation of hate speech. Now, look, it's not only blasphemy against Islam. Now it's blasphemy and defamation law for anything that is insulting not only Pancasila, the 5 principles, but also against the president, against the government policies. So if you insult the government policy, you insult the press, you're punishable by law. Okay, definitely. And this is another one. That's why Jokowi is considered, although he seems to be like ordinary people, humble, well-loved by the majority of Indonesian people, but scholars look at him as not only conservative, but also very authoritarian. Okay. Now, the next move on him is actually also is on the, remember the, remember the academician. This is another hardline approach of Jokowi in trying to repress the hardline Indonesian Islamic movement, not only by the Pancasila discourse, but they also systematically repress academicians. Remember, academicians were influenced or affected following the hardline Islamic movement like Hizbut Tahrir Indonesia, okay, that promoted the caliphate. Public workers, Indonesia, they're all repressed by blacklisting. Some professors were fired, some even arrests. And I can give you examples on that, So what is the discourse to justify that? Well, we are Islam. We are the smiling Islam, the moderate, the tolerant Islam, well known throughout the world. How tolerant, moderate, smiling Muslim Indonesia is. And then the discourse is trying to put forward is actually the discourses of hardliners from caliphate, from the Islamic Defense Fund, is tarnishing the peaceful and tolerant image of Islam in Indonesia. Okay? And again, that is well received by the Indonesian people as shown in the surveys. Well, you trust the surveys or not. Okay, so that's what is the situation in Indonesia now. Now, look at the 2024 after the end of Jokowi's term. What is going on? Well, there are 3 candidates. If you look at the candidates here, Prabowo Subianto, Ganjar Pranowo, and Anies Baswedan. Anies Baswedan is supported by both nationalists and Islamists. But if you look at the Islamists, the support is for Anies Baswedan. And Prabowo Subianto got the most support, mostly from secular nationalists, okay, with the discourse of Pancasila, okay. What is really missing, which is really interesting in the 2024 election, is the absence of the hardline Islamic teaching. Unlike the previous election, where the Islamic discourses are very visible and even prominent in a lot of campaigns, I would say that Anies Baswedan's campaigns were absent in terms of speeches that contain Islamic teaching, let alone Islamic Sharia law or even caliphate. Okay, if there is any mentioning at all, it is indirect. Why? I think there's a realization actually that after the suppression of Jokowi and the acceptance of Jokowi repressive action against hardline Islam and the surveys that shows actually that the people actually supported Jokowi's action, perhaps the hardline Islamic discourse has no place in Indonesian politics. And it shows in the result, the winner is Prabowo Subianto, supported by the majority of secular nationalists, and Baswedan and Ganjar Pranowo didn't make it, okay? And that is the presidential election. Again, vote after vote, despite the conservatism that is rampant in Indonesian politics and in the society throughout the history of Indonesia, the nationalists and the secularists tend to always win, okay? And this is the result of the parliamentary election. One of the oldest party after Masyumi is PPP, didn't make it to the parliament. So there's only 3 Islamic party that came that represented in the Indonesian parliament, and it is a setback for Indonesian Islamic politics. Okay. Now, 2 things there. Why I say the decline of hardline Islamic discourse and Islamic parties in Indonesia is first, United Development Party, PPP, even with the symbol of Ka'bah, the second oldest party in Indonesia since 1970s, for the first time, didn't make it to the parliament, is not represented in the parliament of Indonesia. Now, the only hardline, maybe similar to Masyumi, the most hardline party, Islamic party, is Justice Prosperous Party in Indonesia. You know what happened to that? Okay, during the governor election of Jakarta, it has the candidate Anies Baswedan supposed to be the representative, but the candidate, but it backed down, abandoned the only possible Islamist candidate, and it joined the coalition of the Nationalist Party. Okay. I was also showed there are other signs. Felix Xiao's, the vocal speaker of Hizbut Tahrir, now that Hizbut Tahrir is banned, now he believes in both in Pancasila. Okay. So, okay, I'm gonna end the story, the context here, the why the decline and all that. Okay. So there is a clear setback of Islamic parties and discourses in Indonesia, but I would say politically, okay, vote after votes, campaign after campaign again, it shows that Indonesian people believe more in secular nationalist party than the Islamic party. Okay. Now, although Islamic discourse are not dominant politically, I would say it is dominant and thrives socially and culturally. Why is that? There's a lot of discussion. There's a lot of venues. You go to Indonesia, everywhere you go, the speeches, the sermon, the da'wah. It's like everywhere you go, almost in every venue, there's going to be Islamic prayers. Okay. So the 5 pillars of Islam is always one of the gist of a lot of discussion. And then, okay, wearing hijab. It's a big thing in Indonesia. It's also inundating a lot of the discourse in Indonesia. That is, should you wear hijab or you should not wear hijab? It's always being debated, taking a lot of time and space of the discussion in Indonesia. Okay. And then another thing that is rampant is halal, for example, the issue of halalization. The products has to be certified by the MUE and the government as halal. And it goes a lot of debate, lots of debate. And everywhere you go, there's a lot of mass gathering of Quranic recitation, like pengajian, tabligh akbar. So if you look at all these activities, Islamic discourse is thriving and even dominant, not only among the Indonesian community itself, but even in the general public spheres of Indonesia. Okay. You look also at the language, lots of borrowing from Arabic, you know. Assalamualaikum is a very common address now. Okay. I even changed my textbook in teaching Indonesian. You go to Indonesia, a lot of people say Assalamualaikum. So you say that, okay? And it's a little bit Islamic and a little bit not, but that's part of Indonesian language now, okay? Lots of venues, even in social media, how powerful, influential, and dominant the Islamic discourses are in Indonesia. Even the last one, I would say, the daily call to prayers. Is that part of the discourse? Absolutely. Look at Indonesian Islamic leaders spend a lot of time discussing and debating about prayers. Isn't that dominating the public space? Yes. Okay. Why is that? Well, you got to be careful. Criticism against the call to prayer or adhan, you know, can end up in jail. Some people with jail for criticizing that. That's why there's a lot of discussion on that. It just shows again, okay, politically, maybe the Islamic discourse is not prominent in Indonesia, maybe even declining, but socially, culturally, religiously, it's one of the most important and dominant discourse in Indonesia. Thank you. I want to stop here so that there will be time for question. Thank you, Professor Swarali.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Suwarno. You can unshare your screen now.
Okay.
Thank you for this very fascinating talk and lecture, and for just taking us through the historical political atmosphere and politics of Indonesia. It's fascinating. Thank you very much indeed. I just have a few points. before I can open it up for, the audience. And thank you very much indeed for everybody who joined us after we began, because many of you, especially Professor Misbah Zulfa, Elizabeth, thank you for being with us here. And then all of us, Sada and Azra Hussein, and all of the students and faculty who joined us from ASU abroad and from Indonesia as well. Thank you very much indeed. We appreciate that. All right, Peter. I think that I enjoyed this very much indeed. This is very rich and fascinating. But from your conclusion, it seems to me the title of your lecture, maybe you wanted to say Islamist, not Islamic, because from what you're saying, that socially Islamic discourse is very much alive, and all of as you said, the vast majority of Indonesian are Muslims. Indonesia, of course, is the largest Muslim country in the world, over 200 million people. So I think you meant to speak about the radicals, the extremists, who are the, in academia, they're referred to as Islamists. And these have been rejected, apparently, from your, lecture by the Indonesian people, and that they were not, members of the parliament anymore, and so on. So, but the other points that I wanted to, just talk about, I have always been fascinated with the concept of Pancasila, and it's very interesting to see from your talk, the development and the decline, and then the rise again of Pancasila for, along with nationalism and so on. So I was going to ask you about, remember our friend now, Dr. Anaya Rahmani, and she was here. She did her master's. I was on her master's committee. And then, of course, she went back to Indonesia, she did her PhD, and now she's dean of when University College. And, her master thesis was on, the Majlis Mujahidi Indonesia, if you remember that. And she talked about the women of Majlis Mujahidi Indonesia as calling themselves feminists. In their own radical, Islam, they were referring to themselves as feminists as well. It was a fascinating master thesis. We're going to come back to that. This is one of the points that I'd like you to talk about. And where is Majlis Mujahideen Indonesia today, for example? Is it the same as Hizb Tahrir or something else? All right. Now, when you talk about Khilafah, and some of them were claiming Khilafah, it's very interesting, because the misconception about Khilafah is not only in Indonesia, it's also in Muslim Arabic-speaking countries. And as you remember, my 2009 book, A Religion, Not a State, Ali Abdul-Razik's Islamic Justification of Political Secularism in Islam, where Ali Abdul-Razik was arguing that Islam is a religion, not a state. It is a religion, not a state. It's a completely categorically in radical contrast to what the Islamists and the radicals are calling for an Islamic state as the Caliphate, which had very different problems throughout the history, whether the Abbasid era or the Umayyad era or the Ottoman Empire. Now, I'm interested also from the different presidents you talked about, given my interest in feminism in Islam, and some of my students who are attending today are taking my, Quran text and women, which is, I teach from a feminist perspective, where women's rights in the Quran, which, an issue that has been distorted significantly by male interpreters of the Quran for the past 14 centuries. Now, many Muslim scholars, American and otherwise, are writing books highlighting women's rights in the Holy Quran. Now, my interest in Megawati as one of the few female Muslim women leaders who were elected, whether prime minister like Benazir Bhutto in Pakistan twice, or in Turkey or Bangladesh and Indonesia as well. So I'm sure that Megawati is a different issue here. So that's one of the points that I wanted to mention. Now, one of our students, Bethany Elias, that I was on her committee, she finished her PhD in religious studies at ASU, and she's teaching now at ASU. her dissertation was on women's mosques in Indonesia. And she went to Indonesia and she went to Jakarta and she went to different parts of Indonesia and attended some of those mosques. It was a fascinating, piece of writing that she is now turning into a book. So despite whatever that is politics in Indonesia, it seems to me that there is a margin of freedom for women to have their own mosques, and these are not radical Muslims. These are very moderate Muslims. And so one of the points that came to mind when you were talking. And so this margin of democracy. Now, one interesting thing that you mentioned is banning people from, saying, in Christmas, Merry Christmas, or addressing non-Muslims, not allowed to address them or congratulate them. And this is also a very big misconception. There is nothing in the Quran that addresses that, and so on. It's not only in Indonesia; it's all radicals,
yeah,
all Islamists. Go
I
ahead.
was just showing the impact of edicts by MUE, not necessarily receive exactly what is intended, but
Yes, I know.
sometimes it is expanded or actually misinterpreted. But what I'm trying to say is actually a lot of the fatwa by UMI actually has a discursive tone of a little bit of intolerance or exclusiveness. That's what
Absolutely.
yeah.
And yes, and you mentioned also one of the, I don't know, the recent or the past president who was saying non-Muslim cannot be a governor.
Yes.
And that brought to mind immediately for me that I wanted to share with you and our audience and guests the case of Senegal. I was invited in 2012 by the State Department in a special program called Speaker and Specialist to go to Senegal. And it was about Sufism in Senegal, and it was Ramadan, and then religious freedom in the US. And I was invited to speak to different Sufi orders. Now, Senegal is the only African country that never witnessed a military coup because their Sufism is very tolerant. The first president of Senegal after independence was Leopold Senghor, Professor Senghor, who was Christian, despite the fact that Senegal is almost 100%, Muslims. So it's interesting to see, that, a president saying non-Muslim cannot be a governor. And so these are just points that I wanted to share with you to address if you want, or just opening up again now to the audience, whoever wanted to make a comment or have a question, or if you would like to comment before that to some of my points. Thank you very much.
I think we should go ahead and invite other audience to ask questions.
Yes, these are only comments that I had. So anybody who would like to make a comment, please go ahead and unmute yourself, or raise your hand, or just go ahead and talk. You can either have a question or share a point or a comment.
Okay, there's one in the chat.
Yeah. I love your lecture. It showed how Arabic and Islamic studies play a big role in promoting cultural understanding. And I like how it's connected history to modern discussions. The part about Indonesia, interesting too. I love how Islamic discourse keeps shifting based on political power. And it's made me think about how language and pilots shape each other over time.
Yes. Yes, I agree. The political dynamic definitely, and the the leaders actually, and then the leaders is having the power to select what goes and what cannot be discussed, and then the powerful always can portray themselves as the hero, and then the others as the enemies kind of thing. So yeah, that is the dynamic in Indonesia. But this is what is interesting about Indonesia is actually when you repressed.
Yes.
When you repress Islamic discourse, seems like you win, but you win temporarily. Look at the oppression under Suharto. And then Islamic discourses went underground, Islamic movement underground. Once you give them the opportunity, they explode. Look at the massive, drastic changes, Islamization of Indonesia. After Suharto allow or give the opportunity for Islamic movement to thrive. Okay, so I don't think that the oppression. I would even consider it's also a form of oppression under Jokowi. You ban Hizbut Tahrir, Islamic Defender Fund, firing people who are hardline Islamist workers or academicians. It doesn't mean that the discourse, the desire for caliphate, of a strict implementation of Islamic law, of Sharia, is gone. No, it went underground. And later, when there's an opportunity, it will let up again and even more powerful. So I disagree actually with Jokowi's approach. Actually, I would leave Hizbut Tahrir to stay. It's not violent. They're just advocating ideas about caliphate, and then let the Indonesian people judge. Because in the end, when the Indonesian people judge, look at the votes. The votes still show they do not want Islamic hardline parties, excuse me, to take power. So that's I think would be the best way that the approach should be taken. Okay. And what is really interesting now in the development in Indonesia, I've been talking about the discursive contestation between nationalists and Islamists. Now, what is strong and powerful is not the contestation between the two. We forgot actually, one of the most important contestation is between the moderate liberal Muslims versus the hardline conservative Muslims. Okay.
Thank you.
So who are criticizing? If you're Christian, you're criticizing criticizing the call to prayer, adhan. You can go to jail. But among Muslim themselves, they are debating. They're fierce debate. Okay, toward Islam should be more tolerant, more inclusive, and the other side, Islam should be more intolerant and more exclusive. So that is what is really interesting in Indonesia. I would say let them both thrive in a debate, and let's see what Indonesian. In the end, I think the Indonesian people want more peaceful kind of Islam, more tolerant kind of Islam, so that Indonesia can have a stable political community. All right.
Which is the nature of Islam. Thank you, Abdullah Latiya, my student from Kuwait in my Arabic 341, the context and women, and all of the other students as well. But the radicals, Peter, not only in Indonesia, all over, or the Islamists in particular who are doing political Islam, they need to understand that the Quran says, لا إكراه في الدين. That's the strong Arabic. Let there be no compulsion in religion. That's what the Quran says. So they're imposing things on people, and their own concepts of Sharia, so-called Sharia, is completely different than the original Sharia that also was very tolerant. And there were 4 schools of Islamic jurisprudence, which, reflects on when, the Prophet's hadith that, this disagreement among my nation is mercy. So people can disagree, but they don't have to, fight or impose their radical, So at this point, I would like to invite Professor Misbah Zulfa. I'd like to welcome you, Professor, first. And if you'd like to have any comments or anything.
Okay, there's okay.
Yeah. When so?
Vishnu.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, let me answer you briefly, just briefly.
Okay.
You're talking about, my view and my experience listening to both sides, the hardline Islamists, the radical Islamists, the more strict Islamists versus the more tolerant, open-minded, contextualist instead of literalist. I would say it seems like almost any position, if you want to be strict Islamic law implemented, or you want to be intolerant, they can always find the verses and the justification in Islam. If you want to be really tolerant, you can also find the justification in Islam. Okay, it seems like it's just my impression because I asked them, I argue with them, I talk to them, I ask them, they find really good proof of what is there. Okay, so yeah, that's why I think we should give room for both of them. Let them, because they do have their justification even from the Quranic verses itself. Okay, let's go to Wisnu. Pa Wisnu, go ahead.
But nothing in the Quran that can justify their, intolerance. Nothing at all. If the Quran says, let there be no compulsion in religion,
Yeah.
and so on. That's a debatable issue as well. Let's go to answer. And then
Okay.
All right. Go ahead, Pak Wisnu.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. This is really very nice, and I'm very glad to hear you. And my question is, are there any relationship between the Islamic discourse in Indonesia with the conflict situation in Middle East? Just that. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, of course. That's a part of the main discourse of Indonesia. A lot of the discourses, if you look at the Islamic speeches, Ustad, Kiai, ulamas, they're all, okay, Israel first. Israel and America is the common enemy. Okay, even the moderate Islam, even the nationalist secularists in Indonesia, they also agree that Israel and America is the common enemy. And that's undebatable, almost, I would say. Okay. So associating sometime with minority groups, Christian and non-Muslim, sometime with Israel and the Gaza issues, whatever, in America sometimes, and that's sometimes a source of a conflict in Indonesia. Okay. So I think that, and of course, the more hardline, the more conservative you are, the more apparent, the more salient the speech of anti-Americanism and anti-Israelis. Okay, the more moderate one probably are less assertive, in showing their portrayal of Israel and America as the common enemy, especially.
Thank you very much, as we're running out of time. But Abdul Malik, go ahead.
No,
he has his hand.
Can I continue my question?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Abdul Malik, go ahead.
Abdul Malik first. Abdul Malik. Okay. Abdul Malik, go ahead.
Abdul Malik, yes.
Yeah.
He has his hand.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. First of all, I would like to confirm what I kind of heard Professor Suwarno was saying, that he disagrees with the Jokowi's treatment of Hizbut Tahrir, that you would prefer to allow them because they're non-violent and did not express. Is that accurate?
Yes. No. This is to show in a real democracy, you cannot eliminate any group that is no evidence of violence. There is no evidence of violence from Hizbut Tahrir. I think they should be reprimanded or jailed, whatever, if they are involved in real violence. But if in a real democracy, if it's just ideas, okay, if it's just expression of beliefs, it should be allowed. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of difficult. I understand your point of view that yes, indeed, the Hizbut Tahrir is not making any violence at all. I mean, but it has been working at the cultural levels very intensively, and that has manifested in the kind of the bit of Islam that was kind of blooming since the reform era. So I was wondering what it is it's difficult, I mean,
yes,
I know that well, when it was still existed, I opened the websites, and it's very clearly in the websites. It says that they have 4 stages of struggle. now the currently and the recently they only at the cultural levels, but there would be the second stage, which is more sort of political, and then third is kind of seizing power with the militarily if necessary, that sort of things, and and it is very evident that their ideology is really contradicts the constitution. So what kind of prescription that you're having? And I was imagining if we had allowed the Hizbut Tahrir to stay course, then at some points it would be very difficult to because with the cultural
I
work is
understand
very
that.
intensive.
I understand
That's the
that.
first time. Yeah, that's the first my first question. The second one is that it's kind of a little it's common actually. I was hoping that you highlight more on the influence of international transnational movement, and I would think that if you explore that ground, there's a lot more sort of explanation that we could potentially give to the how Indonesia dynamics as far as Islam is concerned. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with you on the second part, the international. I didn't mention that at all actually, but it does play a very, very important role, because if you look at Hizbut Tahrir, it's a transnational organization. Okay, even some other movement also funded from the got funding from internationally, got support. Okay, even PKS sometimes is in connection with other international organization as well. So no, especially Hizbut Tahrir definitely is transnational, and it has mission. And the reason for the first question, the reason that I'm saying that is that I was just concerned about democracy in Indonesia. That's all. The reason is, if it continues the approach sort of authoritarian, banning an organization, without a clear violation, I think is against democracy, if you follow the principle of democracy. But if you follow the principle of Pancasila, that anything against Pancasila should be wiped out, well, yeah, that's not a democracy, I would say. That's why I would say, I said it was Jokowi's era is a Pancasila term, meaning you elevate Pancasila from principle that you can criticize, even mock, into the same level as Quran. Basically, you cannot defame Pancasila. Okay, that also is interesting in that you do not allow the criticism of the principle of the country, whereas in a real democracy, you can. Okay, like in a lot of
in a real democracy, even the president is not above the law, as we see in the United States of America, despite whatever problems there are. But Peter, I agree with you that it's democracy. So all these parties, including Hizb ut-Tahrir and all, they will run for election. If they win, they become in power. Otherwise, they become in the opposition. But we don't have a perfect democratic system yet.
Yes.
But yes, nobody should be banned under a democratic, system. Definitely that should be the case.
Yeah.
Now, if you see some of the radical Muslims in Sudan, for example, where I was born, and they come through a military coup. It was called the National Islamic Front, very radicals. And then it was a dictatorship for over 30 years by the military dictator Omar al-Bashir. These are the Islamists of Africa or Sudan, and who impose dictatorship. All political parties are banned, everything. There was a huge demonstration and revolution in 2018-19 that kicked him away. But again, another military came in October 21, Al-Burhan, who is the current military dictator. This is not democracy. This is dictatorship. I would like to invite Professor Misbah Zulfa, please unmute yourself if you'd like to say anything, and I would like to welcome you again, Professor. Are you here? You're muted.
No, she's not.
Maybe she's away.
Okay.
All right. Anybody
I want-
else? Because we have to wrap up. Peter, I'd like to give you the final word to conclude and wrap up, and as we are running out of time.
Okay.
Excuse
If
me,
nobody has any
I thought I interrupted Pak Wisnu Hanggoro previously, so you may please invite him again.
Pak Wisnu, you want to say something?
Anybody who'd like to say
Always
something?
Yeah,
no.
I just hello.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm just wondering which country that most influenced the situation Islamic growth in Indonesia. Thank you. There are many countries, Islamic countries in Middle East, and
Yes.
which country actually?
Well, I have to show the data, but I think Saudi Arabia is one of them because of the funding that is flowing from that country to Indonesia. Okay, that would I would, but there are others too. There are others as well. Okay, not only Saudi Arabia, but there are others. I'll say. But I want to go back again, Pak. Okay, the discursive contestation in Indonesia is going on, not only nationalists and Islamists, but among the Islamists itself, especially between the moderate, the tolerant, and the exclusive, the hardliners. Okay, I want to agree with you, Pa, actually, with the situation in Indonesia. Maybe it's true that Indonesian people are not really ready for the real liberal democracy. Why is that? Because the discourse that is faith-based, Islamic discourse is faith-based. Why is it special? It's very difficult. People are very reluctant to disagree and to criticize. Okay, whenever it is presented as an Islamic discourse, it is from God. It cannot be wrong. Okay, if you are a faithful, devout Muslim, you tend to listen and you tend to conform to that discourse. That's why, to a degree, yes, you're right, Pa. I agree. The only reason that I would agree that some form of repressive approach may be useful, because when it comes to Islamic discourse, people do not dare to criticize or disagree.
Well, that's not Islamic discourse. That's Islamist discourse.
Islamist
Because
discourse.
Islamist, yeah, political Islam. Because
okay, Islamist
if
discourse.
Islam, I mean, if Islam had
sorry.
four schools,
I understand. I agree.
I couldn't agree more.
Four schools of jurisprudence, that means people can disagree among themselves, but the radicals now are just distorting Islam, and that's Islamism, actually, and unfortunately, that is Islamism. But anyways, anybody else would like to say anything? I'd like to thank you all very much indeed, and I was hoping that Professor Misbah Zulfa will join us in talking, but it seems that she is away, and I know that it's very, very early morning in Indonesia now, right? So because she hasn't unmuted herself when I invited her. But we thank her and we thank you all very much indeed for coming today. And special thanks to Professor Peter Suwarno for this fascinating lecture and for engagement by the students and faculty and everybody who contributed to this. Thank you very much indeed. I'd like to remind you all of our next lecture in the lecture series. Here it is going to be on the 28th of February, 3 days before Ramadan. Professor Nassar from the University of Arizona. She's going to talk about Palestinian women. She's herself a Palestinian American woman, a steadfastness of Palestinian women struggle against oppression. And we have a film series, Goodbye Julie, that's going to be on April 8th. And we have a poetry series, classical, modern Arabic poetry. It's going to be the 23rd of April. And so we invite you to all of these events. Please join us. And thank you again very much indeed for joining us. And thank you, Professor Peter Suwarno, once again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Terima kasih Pak
Thank you.
Suwarno. Ya,
Thank you
thank
very
you.
much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.